Welcome to the Warrior Mystic. I wanted to talk about something today that has recently come up a lot of times. It's the phases of paganism, or phases of following a Norse or Druid spiritual path. And a lot of this comes about because we live in America in a Judeo-Christian society, and sometimes that tends to follow us when we go into a new religious or spiritual path. But phase one is the joy at discovering paganism, especially for those who come from Christian paths that have a lot of dogma, and going into a pagan path where the choices you make are pretty much up to you. There's a lot of difference there from Judeo-Christian religion. There's that freedom from dogma and the freedom to seek your own path. And then after a while, phase two starts to kick in. You become curious, you start learning about everything, you read a lot of things, and then you discover that some of this stuff is real and some of it is not so real. There's a lot of Reconstructionism, and what that means is people want to reconstruct the religion of our ancestors. But is that really possible? For example, just one example from my own path, the Norse spiritual path. If we try to reconstruct the Norse myths, we soon find that there are several different versions of the same myth, that none of them are exactly fitting in with the rest of them. So what that says to me is that there is no one canonical version, there is no Bible of Norse mythology. There are just different legends for different times, different periods, different tribes even, and for different situations. So if you fall too far into that rigid Reconstructionism, you run into the risk of becoming dogmatic and bringing that Christian type of dogma into your own pagan spiritual path. And that leads to phase three. What I call phase three is the look how righteous I am phase. That's where someone's been on the pagan path for a year or two, and then they have started reading a lot, and they're starting to get familiar with the beliefs. They're starting to see where these things fit together. But then they start noticing people who might not be as far along as they are, who are doing things and following things that they may have seen from, say, a TV show, like Vikings or the Norsemen, if you really want to get technical about it. Or maybe even something like Sabrina the Teenage Witch. And you're looking at that and saying, well, that's not how it really goes. I know better than that. And that's okay to do that as long as you apply it to your own path. But when you start looking at how righteous I am and following my own pagan path, you're running the risk of not following your pagan path, because the idea with paganism is that you're free to choose your own path. But that doesn't mean that everybody else should follow the path that you're on. So it's kind of like bringing that Christian dogma in there with you, but now you must follow the pagan dogma. And the problem there is that there is no pagan dogma. I started out my pagan path as a Celtic person, a Druid path. And there's a lot of Druid Reconstructionism that attempts to go on. But the truth is that most of what we have about our pagan ancestors is not primary sources. It all comes filtered through what monks wrote about what they thought that our pagan beliefs were back in those days. That's part of the problem. Do we really take those Christian monks seriously when they say this is what pagans practiced? Another part of that is the past pagans were an agrarian society, an agrarian warrior society, and we live in a post-industrial society. So do we really want to revive pagan practices like committing human sacrifice and reading the future by the entrails of the way the victim died because of how you stabbed them, that sort of thing, or stuffing people into a wicker man and setting them on fire? Do we really want to revive the entire body of pagan practice, even if it was possible? So what we really practice now is as accurate as we can possibly get it based on Reconstructionism, but at the same time, it's a new growth of the same tree. It's something different than what our ancestors practiced, and that's okay too, as long as we're trying to honor the ancestors by sticking as much to the path as we possibly can. And when you do that, you've come into phase 4. And what that is at phase 4 is that nothing anyone else does impacts your path. Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. So, for example, if people watch the Vikings TV show and decide, wow, I want to be a Viking, and then they dress up in the costumes from that show, even though they're not really historically accurate, or get tattoos based on reconstructions that happened during the medieval period instead of what our ancestors would have actually worn, they're still imitating the Viking heritage, the Norse heritage, or, the Celtic heritage, or whatever heritage. They're still imitating it. They may not know what they're doing, but they are wanting to know. So instead of complaining about what they're doing, why don't we focus on teaching them? Why not celebrate the fact that they're interested and help them to become what they want to be? And at the same time, bear in mind that what we know might not be all that accurate either, because what we're basing it on is what Christian monks thought our belief system was, in most cases. Sometimes we can reconstruct it archaeologically, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's accurate either, because then it's being filtered through the archaeologist's opinion of what we might have practiced in those times. The best thing you can do there is to be open-minded and just kind of go with the flow, go with your own path, not worry too much about what other people are doing, and just enjoy paganism for what it is, a new expression of an old growth.